Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say, it's very interesting that he has been, Donald Trump has been petrified of Joe Biden. We saw last night why. That combination of suburban voters, a massive suburban voter turnout. We know so much of that is driven by anti-Trump sentiment. Also, the high number of black voters. As Robert said, it looks like Joe Biden may be starting to piece together that unbeatable Obama coalition again. That's the last thing Donald Trump wants to go up against. But as far as Mike Bloomberg goes, let's talk about Mike Bloomberg for a second. Mike Bloomberg had told everybody that knew him he wasn't going to run for president this year. When Joe Biden started slipping, and it looked like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were going to be the Democrats, Bloomberg told all of his friends, all of his associates, that Donald Trump had to be beaten. And so he jumped into the race late. And, last night, Willie, what the Bloomberg's team said was the same thing. Mike Bloomberg's goal from the beginning has been to make sure that Donald Trump is not reelected, and that's exactly what he's going to do. Those are ominous words for Donald Trump, because this is a man who I suspect will get out of the race, perhaps today or tomorrow, and he will spend his money instead of on 500-foot yachts, instead of on mansions and palaces across the world. He's going to spend his money trying to beat Donald Trump. And that's something that scares the hell out of Donald.
Well, people around the Bloomberg campaign call Mike Bloomberg a rational actor. And by that, they mean if he wakes up the day after Super Tuesday, and here we are now, with no chance to win the nomination, he's not going to continue as a candidate. But as you say, he will continue with his money, set up a super PAC, third-party groups, gun groups, whatever he needs to do to take down Donald Trump. So you can imagine a scenario where you have a nominee, either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, and Mike Bloomberg sort of running a parallel campaign to help them and to go after Donald Trump. As you say, we may see that today even from Michael Bloomberg. Steve's back with me at the board here. Steve, let's look at Bernie Sanders' future here.
Yeah.
We talked about Joe Biden's future. State of Minnesota could be something like a canary in a coal mine for Bernie as he looks ahead to states like Washington, who've switched from caucuses to primaries.
I think that sounds like a technical thing. I think that's actually a really big deal because, again, with Biden taking a delegate lead here, we just went through that math. There are some states where it looks like Biden is going to get big delegate margins. If you're Sanders, that means you've got to find states where you can match him. If Biden gets a big win in Georgia, you got to find a big state where you can get a big win or you're in big trouble on the delegate picture. So his campaign, Minnesota is the kind of state his campaign prior to yesterday was pointing to. In 2016, in the caucuses in Minnesota, Sanders got 62% in Minnesota. Big margin, pretty big state. Yesterday, though, Sanders sitting at 30. Minnesota switched from a caucus to a primary. Participation, look at that, well over, hundreds of thousands of people there. This dwarfs anything you're going to see in a caucus. And look at that. All of a sudden, Biden's winning this thing. It's almost 10 points. It takes us to next week. We tell you next week, Mississippi, for instance, setting up so well for Biden. Well, the Sanders campaign is saying, hey, take a look out at Washington State. Washington State was a big Sanders state in 2016. Washington State was also a caucus state. And if Minnesota tells you something, if it's a harbinger at all, it's that big wins in big caucus states for Sanders may not translate into big wins in big primary states. And if he can't find big wins in big primary states, that makes the advantage that Biden is establishing, especially in this neck of the woods, not just, but especially in this neck of the woods. You've got to find something new. You've got to find voters you haven't attracted in 4 years.
There was so much talk after New Hampshire, Steve, and you heard it too. Will we wake up the morning after Super Tuesday and see Bernie Sanders with an insurmountable lead based on what was going to happen in Texas and California? Let me put it to you another way, and I won't ask your opinion, but just based on the data, is it going to be tough now to catch Bernie Sanders? Has it flipped?
Or to catch Joe Biden.
Excuse me, Joe Biden. Has it flipped based on what we saw last night?
It's tough with the coalition that's now clearly established for Bernie Sanders. I mean, I would put it this way. When Sanders won Nevada, 2 weeks ago? I can't even count the days anymore. I think what the expectation was at that point was there would be a bandwagon effect. And groups of voters who Sanders had struggled with would slowly start to get on board. He'd win some more. They'd get on board some more. It's a pattern we've seen a lot in the past. South Carolina put an abrupt and immediate halt to that. If you looked at Sanders' black support in South Carolina, his number looked basically identical to 4 years ago. His campaign said at the end of 2016, they recognized it. Getting blown out among black voters in 2016 is the reason he fell 3 million votes behind Hillary Clinton nationally. They spent 4 years trying to address that problem, trying to make South Carolina not the disaster it was in 2016. It was every bit the disaster in 2020 for Sanders as it was in 2016. The entire Southeast last night was every bit the disaster for him it was in 2016. He has a big problem with older voters, 45 plus, especially 60 plus. It was there in 16. You see it in every state we're looking at last night. You see the same problems. And so you look at this map, unless that changes, unless all of a sudden Bernie Sanders is getting 30, 40% more, 40, 50% of the black vote, unless suddenly after 4 years he's making inroads with older voters, the demographic patterns that really seem set in here, given a Biden delegate advantage, it gets tough to find.
Yeah, Joe, I mean,
wow.
Bernie Sanders needed to expand his base from 2016, obviously. And last night he lost the black vote by 40 to 50 points in some of those southern states.
And he worked hard over the past 4 years trying to do that. It just didn't happen last night. Mike, Willie was talking about New Hampshire, and just let's talk about this on a personal level. You've known Joe Biden for a very long time. I've known him for quite some time as well. And anytime we're together, let's just say there's never any silence. It's talking, laughing, joking. But when he came on set in New Hampshire the morning of the primary, when his political obituaries were already being written, it was striking that for the first time that you had known him and I had known him. We exchanged a few pleasantries, and then he just sat down and we said nothing. Because what do you say at a man's political wake? And that was, after all, what people were calling New Hampshire. And here we find ourselves, you see Biden last night, we find ourselves with one more example of Joe Biden getting knocked down, pulling himself back up to his feet and fighting back like hell. It's an extraordinary trait, not just politically, but personally. And this man has done it more in his lifetime than any other politician I have ever known.
Well, Joe, I mean, you just summed up his life in just that brief analysis of New Hampshire and his mood that day and the reaction to his candidacy back then in New Hampshire. Yes, indeed, people were writing him off. But Joe is Joe. He does get up off the mat. He's done it repeatedly throughout his life. And again, hearkening back to South Carolina, I think one of the big things that people saw who were on the fence about Joe, given his losses in Iowa and in New Hampshire, was the first thing they saw quite visibly, quite emotionally on television, which is like a national MRI. They saw humanity. And it's been missing in the Oval Office since January 20th, 2017. And they saw empathy, and they saw a person that they remembered that they liked and believed in. And that's the person they saw last night. And I think across the country, what happened yesterday, Joe, you know this better than anybody. You've been on the ballot. Politics is a people business at its root. And I think you saw hundreds and thousands of people coming out coast to coast, Democrats. And one thing ruled above all: they are not willing to roll the dice on the future of this country by wasting a vote.
Right.
They want to win. They want someone who can beat Donald Trump. And I think many of them feel strongly now that in Joe Biden, they have that candidate.
Yes, sir. And when people go and they vote, Mika, they don't calculate. Most voters that I met over my 4 campaigns for Congress, they don't calculate. They don't go in there and try to figure out, if I vote for candidate A, how will that impact candidate B? They go in, and it's a gut instinct. They go with their gut. Who understands me, and who do I understand? Who's going to fight for me? And there's no doubt that, again, he didn't have money. He didn't have organization. He didn't have much on his side at all. But he had that on his side, and last night it made all the difference in the world.
Many good candidates to choose from, and you can't actually get into the minds of voters, but for many, I really believe it just felt like the right thing to do right now. Still to come, with all the talk of money being the difference maker in politics, we'll look at how much Mike Bloomberg spent on Super Tuesday compared with Biden's return on investment. Plus, the latest on the coronavirus as the outbreak continues to spread, taking more lives with it. Important information on that just ahead on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.